I guess I've been listening to what Dr. Farouk has been saying, and it's it's a conversation to have at the right time, because zakat is definitely developing, and from my experience in the zakat industry, there's definitely been discussions on how blockchain can be incorporated within zakat institutions. In the UK, they've already been experimenting with accepting Bitcoin. But when we're talking about blockchain, we're not only talking about cryptocurrencies and paying zakat through cryptocurrencies, right? I think that's a major difference and distinction we have to make. That when we're talking about blockchain technology for zakat, we're not talking about using cryptocurrencies. There's potentially much more to it, and that's what we have to really address and discuss. So, just today's presentation, the overview is I want to just first touch upon that: is blockchain always beneficial, or are the legacy-based infrastructure that we have, like for example, the current infrastructure that people are using, whether it's cloud-based giving, whether it's the financial institutions that we have, the current infrastructure that we have, is that meeting the needs of charities, of zakat institutions, and is there really a need to move to blockchain for this, or is it just an alternative without many solutions? Secondly, I want to discuss the issue of what are the potential advantages. Like, if we were to do a cost benefit analysis, what would the advantages of blockchain be, right, in zakat institutions? Thirdly, what would be some of the challenges of adopting blockchain? And fourthly, I think Professor Habib, Dr. Habib, he did discuss this. He just touched upon it, the Binance case study. I want to talk about Binance and the blockchain charity foundation. I think it's a really good case study to look at them and really see the impact of how charity is being operationalized on blockchain. That will make us appreciate and understand to a greater degree how zakah can potentially work. So, just moving ahead. So the first discussion is blockchain always beneficial? And this is a real question, because I think people think blockchain automatically means scale. It automatically means greater reach, greater benefit. It means better operations, but not necessarily. And this is a real question. So those who have understood how blockchain operates will begin to appreciate these questions that are asked, because first of all, what is blockchain then, right? Just to set the scene, and I'm sure we've been discussing this all day, but just to remind everybody, blockchain is just simply a ledger, right? It's a ledger. Yes, some of the benefits are it's a shared ledger. It's not controlled by a single entity. It can be, it's immutable. It has a timestamp. So therefore, there's greater transparency. But at the end of it, it's just a ledger, right? That's the key thing. And of course, anything can be recorded on a ledger. It's just like a bookkeeping mechanism. And these blocks, which are connected through chains, can hold data. And of course, you can also have private blockchains. It's not necessary that you have to have a blockchain which is shared by everybody, used by everybody. No, a single institution can have a blockchain amongst themselves. But again, you have to see whether the cost-benefit analysis, is it really worth having blockchain implemented in your institution if there's really nobody else who has access to the data? It's only you controlling the data. These are some of the questions are raised. So why is blockchain popular? These are some of the key, you could say, buzz terms and buzzwords. The fact that it's decentralized, the fact that it's cryptography involved, so the data is meant to be more secure. Blockchain is immutable, so nobody can tamper on the data, because every block in a blockchain has a signature, right? It has a code or a signature, and that is linked in every single block. So if you were to tamper with one, it'll show on the rest that this has been tampered with, because it doesn't correspond to the other blocks, right? So it makes blockchain immutable. That makes blockchain more resilient from being tampered with, from fraudulent activity, so on and so forth. But then when does blockchain make sense? So for a zakat institution and for any organization, when does blockchain really make sense? So the first is your company or zakat institution dependent on a third party for all its operations? If it is, then you're sharing information, you're sharing data, you're relying on another party. And that's where this question of trust comes in. And that's where the question of trust comes in, when other parties are involved. So potentially, if other parties are involved, everybody is working on similar information or has access to this similar information. That's when the question of having a trust mechanism, having something to ensure trust is required. And that's what blockchain really provides. That's why they call it a trustless system. Blockchain is also known as a trustless system because you don't need a third party governing authority overseeing this. It can be done by the protocol on the governance of the blockchain itself. And then secondly, the question would arise that is this third party burning a hole through your pocket? Meaning, is it costing you a lot, ensuring that the administration, oversight, governance is all in place to ensure operations are carried out in a in an optimal fashion at a level which you are pleased with. And then thirdly, do you need a clear audit trail for your company, right, to make sure everything is in place? This is another question. So these are three questions I feel are vital before any charity considers adopting blockchain. Because remember, this would be then your infrastructure. Blockchain is digital infrastructure. Think of it like that. It's what would underpin your entire practice and your systems of a charity. And that's what it means when we talk about adopting blockchain for a zakat institution, more than just accepting crypto. One element of blockchain for charities is just adopting crypto payments. That's simple. Anybody can do that. It's a matter of opening up a wallet, right? You open up an e-wallet and you accept donations via cryptocurrencies. But what we're talking about here is your entire operations from your end to end, right? From the moment a payment is made to the moment it's been distributed, and all the management in between of these funds is embedded within blockchain. That's what really the discussion is. So is that paradigm shift something of value, something worthwhile? That's a question which every business has to do a cost-benefit analysis of, because it's not beneficial for a company or an institution which is working, in isolation, just doing its own thing. For example, there might be a family office, right? A family office somewhere which pays its own zakat. It takes out its own zakat and it pays to a known recipient that he knows every year. It might not need blockchain. Blockchain wouldn't make much sense for them, right? Where you have an international organization which has multiple service providers and service users, beneficiaries, payers, and multiple other parties. Then you have the governance involved. You might have an umbrella body overseeing. You might have other subsidiaries. Then in that situation and scenario where it's an international organization with multiple arms, multiple bodies connected to it, service users, service providers, then it may make sense to consider using blockchain because there's so many parties involved and governance at a large scale would, it'd be costly. So that's where really the question of blockchain would arise and make sense. So, these are some of the key questions for a zakat institution. That is corruption a concern? Because remember, one of the benefits which we'll touch upon is mitigating corruption by a blockchain, because there's more transparency. Right? It can't be tampered with. Nobody can hide anything then if there's multiple parties involved. So for a zakat institution, if there's corruption, there's a concern of corruption, then blockchain would definitely have a tick, meaning it could potentially solve this problem of corruption if you don't have strong governance, right? That's why the second point is, does the zakat institution have a weak governance framework? So any zakat institution in the world, if it has a weak governance framework, or the countries, as a third point says, the infrastructure of the country doesn't support good governance, or it's not being developed, then you might need to outsource your governance to blockchain, so to speak. Right? So if you don't have the financial infrastructure, you don't have the digital infrastructure, and you don't have good governance internally in an organization, like a zakat organization. Remember, it's zakat we're talking about, which is people's money, hard-earned money. It's an obligation, right, in Islam and Deen, right? They have to pay this. So this is money which is really very sacred. There's a lot of sanctity of that wealth. To play around with zakat money, to do any kind of fraudulent activity, it's a major crime, from a Sharia perspective. So it's something which has to be mitigated at all costs. And then finally, are there multiple parties involved with a lack of accountability and oversight? So if these questions have been answered by a zakat institution, and all of them have been answered positively in the sense that there is high risk of corruption, there is weak governance, there's not great financial infrastructure, good auditing, good regulators, or not developed regulators as such, and there are multiple parties involved, that's when really blockchain could be a potential solution. Even if a country has good regulators, everything's developed, but it has operations across the world with multiple parties involved, multiple things going on, and there needs to be some kind of like central oversight of everything that's happening. Even then, blockchain could be a potential solution and benefit. So what are the potential benefits of blockchain? Number one, and I'm sure this has been discussed by majority and all the presenters before me and the panelists, that zakat payment on a blockchain can potentially be faster. Okay, that's a potential. It's not guaranteed. It is potentially, greater scope to increase speed on blockchain. However, Visa at present. So if you look at the legacy systems, the conventional traditional system that we have right now, Visa, it claims it can process 56,000 electronic transaction messages per second at present. Now that's far beyond majority of blockchains that are out there. That shows you that really using blockchain for this particular aspect at present might not be the best thing. But again, going back to that, when you're using these kinds of methods, traditional methods, and you're trying to make a payment overseas, there's a charge and fee to it. That's one of the, I think, the greatest benefits of blockchain. It would be eliminating those fees that multiple banks charge for dealing with this transfer of funds, right? That's where I think, even if it might be slower than Visa, I think people will still, because of the cost benefit, people potentially would still go to blockchain. It reduces operational costs. That's another potential benefit, what we're just discussing right now, that there's a lack of intermediaries. So because on a blockchain, there wouldn't be many intermediaries. In fact, you could transfer it directly to the wallet of a beneficiary. So therefore, you wouldn't need multiple banks in between you as a charity and the beneficiary to transport those funds. And therefore, there'll be reduced operational costs. And that cost efficiency will, of course, enhance your balance sheet and enhance your operations as a charity. But then again, we can't forget the liabilities and the costs that come with managing blockchain and the infrastructure that's needed. Greater transparency. I mean, in the UK alone, this is a statistic from the UK, that the fraud that takes place, it's even in the UK you have fraud, right? Any country you'd have fraud. It's something which is, we try to mitigate and eliminate as much as possible, but there's always some fraudulent activity which can just escape and get away. So there's approximately 1.65 billion per year. That's a lot of money of fraudulent activity taking place. Now there's a number of things within that's happening, but if that's like the approximate fraudulent activity through the charity sector, then clearly charities need to increase their governance. There needs to be something done to address this issue. And then blockchain is a potential alternative which will allow to track and trace, allow an audit trail to arise and to manifest, and to really mitigate that this fraudulent behavior to some degree. Stronger governance, we talked about, right? We've been talking about how zakat payers can potentially have visibility of the zakat movement. They'll be able to see when the beneficiary has actually received the funds and when the funds have been delivered. So there's stronger governance, there's a clear audit trail, and there's greater visibility, even for the management. So if the managers, the administrators of zakat, they would have a greater awareness of what's happening with funds. And finally, I think was for smart contracts. smart contracts can have a very interesting role in zakat institutions, because remember, when we're talking about zakat, a zakat institution is collecting funds from one end, distributing funds from the other end. And when it's distributing funds, you're required to do a check on the mustahiq, on the zakat beneficiary. That is this person eligible from a Sharia perspective for zakat? Now, what you could do potentially is create a smart contract whereby a person, he inputs all his data, so his finances, his income, his savings, his debts, all of the financial data that's required. If he qualifies based on an algorithm, if he qualifies, then the smart contract can be engineered and coded in such a way whereby any person who passes this test and screening automatically gets funds. So what that means is it's removed human intervention and you've saved costs there. So you're automating the process of zakat administration through the use of smart contracts. And that's a really powerful way where I think a zakat institution can develop its operations and lower its costs by incorporating smart contracts in its infrastructure. But what are some of the challenges then? So we've discussed the benefits, but what are some of the challenges? Number one, lack of knowledge and human resource. This is one of the key challenges at present, I think. Not many people are well versed with blockchain, and that's understandable because blockchain is still in its infancy. It's a new technology. Not all the risks have been explored. We don't know what other risks might appear with blockchain. As Dr. Farooq Habib was saying earlier as well, that the regulators, how will the regulators react? Because the regulation is still being developed in the majority of countries on cryptocurrencies. There's a Sharia concern which cryptocurrencies can be used, can't be used. So there needs to be a Sharia screening, regulatory requirements of how they see everything. So there's lack of knowledge. Human resource is still needed. There's lack of awareness on the technology. Further, there's a lack of cooperation amongst institutions. This is another big, I would say, another big element in the challenge that many institutions, especially in the zakat sector, and I'm talking from my perspective, like more in the UK, in the Western world, America, Europe, coordination is not so great yet. Whereas maybe in Indonesia, in Malaysia, there's greater coordination, there's more of a top-down approach. But in the UK and Europe and the Americas, it's more difficult and it's challenging to have a centralized body, to have a centralized Sharia board, centralized governance. So the lack of cooperation amongst institutions will definitely be a challenge, because blockchain, the greatest value of blockchain is when everybody's working together, a number of participants, a number of members who are using similar data or are benefiting from one process. And when people are not sharing, not working together, collaborating, it can reduce the efficiency of having blockchain. Culture shifting dynamics, right? Blockchain represents a total shift in mindsets and traditional ways. Your whole organization can be unsettled. If blockchain was implemented in an organization which up to date has been using traditional methods and is not so used to using blockchain, it can really impact the entire organization. For example, we're just talking about administration of zakat through the use of smart contracts. That could potentially mean all the administrators of zakat and those who dispense and give zakat might not be needed. That would create a whole job loss potentially for a number of people. So automation is not always favored by everybody, all the stakeholders. Not every stakeholder has a benefit potentially. It might mean that some stakeholders are no longer required in a system where zakat is being operationalized on a blockchain. So that's a whole shift in the paradigm of an organization. Further, speed and effectiveness. We talked about this, how we mentioned about Visa right now having 56,000 transactions a second. With blockchain, scaling has its aggregate cost, and trying to scale operations has more cost to it for by the people involved. So it's not necessary that just having blockchain is beneficial. There has to be a cost-benefit analysis to understand whether blockchain is really and truly something of benefit to that particular institution. Then issues with the token, this has been touched upon. If you're using tokens and cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, or whatever, you're using this on the blockchain to give out to people, then a beneficiary must be able to use these tokens. There's no point giving a token to a beneficiary and he can't use that token. There's no, what's the point of giving him a cryptocurrency, because nobody in his community or society uses these tokens. So if you're using cryptocurrencies, which you would have to do potentially for blockchain, or you tokenize fiat currency, wherever model you adopt, a crypto asset would have to be involved in some degree potentially, but then this crypto asset has to be accepted. And that's why you need this network. You need a number of people, organizations, entities, all part of this ecosystem and network, whereby the payers are paying through here, the beneficiaries are using the same token, and there are service providers and other companies from whom the mustahiq and beneficiary can buy what they need with that token. So they're all part of one ecosystem. That's when it would be potentially most beneficial. Otherwise, there would be challenges and issues with using tokens, because then they would have to convert those tokens back into fiat currency. Not difficult. Of course, it's not difficult, but it's just an additional process and additional, it takes out the seamlessness and streamlined process of blockchain. Finally, the last section, which I just want to close with, is the areas of zakat, which we've been touching, and the case study. So the areas which blockchain potentially can help, if you have this global, international, platform with multiple parties involved, is zakat payments, because the payers and the muzakkis would have clear insight on what's going on, would have greater access. It would strengthen the governance for zakat management. Zakat distribution, of course, because you could use smart contracts in distributing the zakat. And then reporting and impact measurement. That would be really important, because you could see that this person received this much, and then you can also go back and see what difference has it made in their life. You could have a reporting mechanism within that whole system, whereby you can measure impact over time. So these are the areas that potentially where zakat can really empower zakat institutions. Blockchain can empower zakat institutions. And just to now finish with Binance Charity, which is really Blockchain Charity Foundation, was set up by Binance. What they do is they accept, so they have a complete blockchain solution and infrastructure for managing charity payments. So they accept cryptocurrency and fiat. They accept BNB, the Binance token, Ethereum, and Bitcoin, and they want to accept more currencies in the future. Now they have this problem about donation allocation. This is a charity which is operational. It's using blockchain, but this is one of the things that they raise. That donation allocation will depend on the progress of the projects. So there will be some time delay between the donation and distribution to end beneficiaries. And I think what's key up here is this sentence of this. The BCF system cannot send each donor a notice when the fund is distributed. However, all transactions are uploaded on the website, so donors can track the fund and the progress of each project. So it's not as of present, it's not a one-to-one kind of interaction. Rather, it's more a universal record, and you can go and find it out yourself. The next step from here would be really you getting a personalized report. That, look, your particular token was sent to this particular person, distributed at this particular time, and so therefore your zakat has been fulfilled. That would be excellent. Further, how do they operate then? How would zakat operate in a charity? In your life, you'd have to open cryptocurrency wallets for all end beneficiaries, and that's what the BCF does. They have a cryptocurrency wallet for all end beneficiaries, so the funds go directly from those who are paying to the beneficiaries without having to go through NGOs or charities or anything of that sort, or any zakat institution. It goes directly to the end beneficiary. Then the end beneficiary will use this cryptocurrency to redeem goods from local suppliers and retailers, who are also granted with crypto wallets. See, that's the key thing. You have to have that network and ecosystem. You can't operationalize this kind of form of giving if your local suppliers and retailers are not accepting Bitcoin, for example. That's why it's extremely important. And then, of course, the benefit of using blockchain is here, where the zakat payer would be able to see that his money was spent in this organization. So really, it's had an impact because the service provider has received this Bitcoin or this coin or token or whatever it may be. And therefore, you can see the difference that it's making in people's lives. And so for the BCF, their website shows every single donation received and its allocations. All the records have a TXID, which is an identification number for each cryptocurrency transaction. So then you can confirm your donation, you can understand where your payment has gone to. And that's really I guess, the end of my presentation. I hope that was beneficial. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be with you all, and I hope you benefited.